Okay, I'm going to be like a DJ and talk over the ending. So that is Dark Matter, and that is first song on the new record. So thanks for listening to that one. So I thought I'd do something different and play the album. We're playing it in mono because we've got ways of broadcasting that are a little bit easier if we do it in mono, not in stereo. But I think you get the idea, hopefully. Now, and yes, hey, John Neal and Joe, and I see some new names there, and Daryl and Nina and Helen and everybody, and Ken and Caroline and Claudia, Deb and Megan, and it's nice to see everybody tuning in. So this is great. So, I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, but what the hell. So I am going to play later. I'm going to play a bunch of stuff on acoustic that's related to the record, and I'm going to call Terry, and we're going to play the album and kind of do it like the old days when you used to have a record release thing on the radio, and it was like a big deal. You'd tune into Chum FM, and you'd listen to the band play the new record, So we're going to wing it here, and we're going to talk to Scott Matthews, too, and we have, hopefully, some fun things to discuss. What can I tell you? The album is out on Friday, digitally everywhere. Hey, John Paul, you'll like this one. You can say hi to your buddy Scott. And if anybody has anything or any questions, I'll try to catch up and see if I can ask Terry some questions as well. And maybe Terry will be watching the screen too. So I don't know. We've never done this. We're gonna see how it goes. So the record will be out digitally. Next week. So that's Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, everywhere. And we'll do the vinyl probably next year. So big thank you to Terry for producing, Scott for orchestrating, my niece Laura for doing the album artwork, and Stephen Perry for doing the photography on the back of the cover. And it's mastered by Peter J. Moore. And a small group of people working on this thing. So here we go. Let's see. Let's see if Terry picks up.
Hello.
Hello, Terry.
Hello, David.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. And
Excellent.
did you listen to the first track? How did it sound in mono? I know it can't be too loud, so I don't want to distort.
I didn't listen to it because I didn't know if it would be cool when you were calling me, so I didn't listen.
Oh yeah, and there's a delay and everything too. I know that could totally backfire. But yes, somebody's asking Terry. Yes, Terry Brown, producer of The Faces in the Stones, among a million other records. And so just I'm looking at the screen here, Terry, and I'm going to see if there's any questions and stuff too. So we're going to kind of wing it. But
okay, great.
Yeah. So how are you doing? We just spoke earlier, but everything going well with you?
You talking to me now?
I'm talking to you. Yeah, you're the only guy who can. I'm talking to you. Yeah.
You talking to me? Yeah, no, I'm.
Say hi to Ann. Is Ann there?
Yeah, Ann's here. She's chuckling away.
Yeah. I feel like I'm Howard Stern. At least I'm trying to be Howard Stern. So I'm a poor man's Howard.
You're doing a fine job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had curry for dinner tonight.
Oh, nice. Nice.
It was absolutely delicious.
I hope somebody said, "Are you talking to him?" Yes. I mean, they can hear me, right? Everybody can hear me. Let me just check something. I'm always worried about the broadcasting thing. I got the phone rigged up direct through the Focusrite, and I think everything is fine. Okay, so I'll stop. So anyway, you're having curry. Yeah, go on.
And waiting for your call.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah. So how did the first track sound?
I think it sounded great.
Okay. Well, when I leave the phone talking to you, I'll log in and hear the rest of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, can watch in perpetuity. And what did I want to say? Oh, so. I thought, okay, we can talk about a few things. I've got a couple of questions I can ask you. And I'm waiting to see if there's any questions coming in here. How did you guys meet? That's Daryl. What made Terry get involved with you, Dave? Well, that's a good question. What in the world? You know, what were you thinking? And so we can talk about that a little bit because Daryl is a music aficionado and he seems to know a lot about the. My mom says hi. My dad says hi.
Oh, great. Hello
Everybody's
to
saying
them
hi
too.
here, and
Great. Fantastic.
yeah. So okay, do you want to say how we meet? How we meet? How we met?
How we met?
Yeah, how we met? Yeah.
Oh, geez. Well, in a bar, and no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, we met. I'm trying to think how we first met exactly. I
Well,
think it was so. Oh, I think you called me up, didn't you? You
I
called me
did.
up, and
I cold called
yeah,
you.
and
I got
invited
your number
me
from somebody.
to come to a rehearsal of
Hmm.
DB3,
Yeah,
and
because yes, that's right.
that's right. And it was a great experience. And we decided to put some music together. Well, you did.
Well, I had the idea to do an EP with Michael Sadler, so we're going to do like a vocal EP, and I thought, well, you know, we had a great little run with producers there. Big Al, of course, offered the first DB3 to do that, and that was like a giant favor, and that kind of centered around putting a trio together because he really wanted to do that. I really thought we were going to make a guitar record with just the two of us and do wacky guitar music. I mean, not that necessarily that he would play, but that would just be kind of guitar because all the demos that I had sent him were like I sent him 36 tunes in 3 months. And he goes, "Hey Dave," he calls me and goes, "Dave, how old are these tunes?" I said, no, these tunes are brand new. I'm writing them I was doing like 3 a day. So
I
was
wrote
really,
them all yesterday.
I wrote them all yesterday, yeah, and they were all terrible. But so they all spitting them out like chiclets. So you know, then we did that, and we did the second record ourselves. But because the DVD came out, I wanted it to be like a live off the floor recording. So we did it in Sasha's basement where we rehearsed, and we tracked it, and then did a couple of overdubs. So it kind of didn't you meet? Oh my God, we've got somebody I got to cut off here. Did you meet Terry in prison? So so anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. We did the second record, and then you know, I wanted to do like this EP, and I thought, oh geez, you know, I've never I've never met Terry, and how is that? Because you know, we had a lot of mutual friends work on records together. Even remember I mentioned to you like a drummer that I played with, great drummer Juice, and he had worked with Kai, and you did their stuff. And I remember hearing that record in the '90s because I don't think it ever got released. And I said to Juice, I said, "This is great. This is like Queen or something. It's fantastic." And who else? Some other guys. I know he did Kenny McLean's record, right? And Sasha played. I don't know if he played on the record, but Kenny McLean did a really great record called Clear, right? You did that, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I mean that's a great great
that
songs,
was a nice
right?
record.
Yeah, so you know, and I was very friendly with all those guys because, of course, Mark Holmes and I played together for 10 years. So a lot of the, but you know, I don't know where you were.
It's funny because I did some Labatt's commercials with Mark, and you weren't in the band at that point.
Wow. Okay, that must have been still '80s. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
So we kept missing each other.
Yeah. So I called you, and then I was great, and we met, and we did these 3 tunes, and we did some remixing stuff. We did Belmonte. We did must be something else. I think my mind is forgetting something. And then of course we started working with the Crownlands guys because we wanted to. Remember, we went to the Phoenix to see Crownlands, and we were thinking, you know, we need a bass and a drums, and look, the Kevin even plays. I mean, Kevin plays Taurus pedals, and he's got a double neck.
He plays everything.
Yeah, you know, this might work. You know, and they sounded amazing. So we did that record, and that's one of my favorite things ever. You know,
well, that was a masterclass too.
Well, yeah, and what we can give a quick backstory to some of the people listening, to everybody listening, that it was a kind of a way of doing a very elaborate production in a big studio and not, you know, not going broke. So I think the first master class we did was with Michael Sadler and DB3, and we did it at Phase 1, and we did the whole song in one day. And we didn't do any extra tracking. We kept everything, and you mixed it at a later date, whatever. And that track turned out amazingly well. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people mention that song.
Yeah, it turned out great.
Yeah, and Michael was so great on that. And, that was a really good indication that, I don't know, it just felt, I always tell people and ask me about you producing, I always say you kind of produce without, you kind of make suggestions that are so, not subtle, but very polite, but they have really big, lasting.
Not subtle, I love it.
Well, but they have big, lasting impact, even like a one sentence.
Nothing subtle about me.
But you know what I mean? And then it changes the track in a really, really big way. And the one thing I was going to mention, even about Dark Matter, the first track we played, everybody should know that the record was done, and Terry said, I think you should do one more tune. And I had just gotten the D'Angelico guitar, and I wanted a big orchestral guitar with a big kind of solo. And even I was trying to do this understated thing, and it wasn't, and you weren't crazy about it. And Scott kind of said, I think you should take another try at that. And then I finally just went for it and mic'd the amp with the guitar in a fuzz box, and it was like 100% better. But I think, and even that's the beginning track on the record. So it's amazing how, when you have another voice, a producer, kind of do things that might seem obvious, we don't do them. And I think that track really made the record complete. Not to mention you mentioning the acoustic solo too that we added, so we can talk about that one later too.
Yeah, but it balances the record out nicely.
Yeah, and even the song placement. God, I came up with a whole. There's only 5 songs on the record because one of them is almost 13 minutes long, and I never came up with your song order. There's only 5 songs. How is that possible? I'm going, maybe we should try this one and try that one. And why don't we try this first? And I didn't come up with your song order at all. And it's the best song order. So, and it's perfect for vinyl. So everybody out there should know too that, we do things in terms of vinyl. So that even though sometimes it comes out digitally, we're still thinking what's a side A and what's a side B,
Yeah, no, I think it works really well listening to it as a complete piece.
Yeah.
All the tunes work really well together in that order.
Well, this is
I lucked out.
Well, yeah, but you've had some experience with the big long-winded records.
I've always enjoyed doing that. I know I've done it on most of the records that I've made. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because a lot of the times, artists will get to a point where they put so much energy and time into thinking it through. They're like, you know what? Come up with a running order because I can't.
Is that right, Because you would think that so many guys are so controlling they wouldn't do that, But that's great.
Funnily enough, that hasn't been the case. Not with the records I've made, anyway.
Wow. Yeah. No, I did not know that.
And it's a lot of fun doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I certainly enjoy it. I think that the strange thing for me is that I did all this rock stuff for years, of course, and then I decided I was going to do guitar records, and kind of do one guitar record each year. And I have like a lot of records out now, like 3 dozen or something, including singles and EPs and records and DB3 records. And sometimes I put out records without much fanfare, without even telling anybody, and they're very obscure. Sometimes they're just soundscapes. But what I always do is I always make a running order, and I always live with it. I put it on the iTunes, and I put it on my phone, and I drive around and listen to it, and I see if I like it, So that's what I always do. I really enjoyed that kind of thing too, but I was just stumped with that one, and it's so funny there was 5 songs, because initially the record was going to be 4 songs, and that was still a struggle coming up with a song order.
Then we'd have had a real problem.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. So I have been chatting away here, and I'm seeing the screen fly.
Are you going to play another cut?
I'm going to play another cut. Yeah. Do you want to? We still got you. We'll play. Why don't we play the Elegant Universe, and we'll keep you around, and then we'll talk a little bit after that. How's that sound? Now, maybe I'll have to call you back. I don't know if let me see if I can.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why don't you call me back when Elegant Universe is finished?
Okay, I'll do that. So here we go, everybody. We're going to play the Elegant Universe, and we're going to talk to Terry after this, and we'll talk in a minute. Right on.
Bye for now.
Yeah. All right, this DJ thing is kind of working for me. They're not angels. They're voices. Vienna choir, probably. So to answer your question there, Chris, I've credited. I mean, I played, guitar, bass, steel guitar, mandolin, acoustic, electric, all the guitar family stuff. I did a little bit of. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ruby. And I used software instruments. So that song has no keys, I don't think. That's all loud and electric 12-string. And we can talk about that when I get Terry back. But minimal keyboards is what I'm trying to say. And it's orchestrated with software that Scott Matthews did all the orchestration. Oh. Yeah. That nice and...
Hang on.
Yeah. So Terry's back.
You're very quiet on my... Oh, hang on.
Oh, hang on.
Press the right button. There you go.
How about now?
Hello, Dave.
Yeah. I was
that
just
sounded amazing on the phone.
Oh,
I was
good.
Really impressed with it. The orchestration from Scott is stellar.
Yeah,
it really is.
Scott
Just
thinks
beautiful.
Like that. Scott was very, very pretentious and pompous as a little kid, and he listened to classical music, I think, when he was 9. And and he knows more about classical music than I do, and I wouldn't know where to begin orchestrating in that way. So he's got this software, Vienna, and among other software. I think we know about that, but people out there don't. And it's kind of the stuff they use in Hollywood, where he orchestrates to the tracks that I give him. And in this case, I think all he worked with was just, there's so few overdubs. There's the electric 12-string and the loud, right? And he just worked to that. And a lot of our stuff is not to a click. This tune was to a click, but I was going to say that a lot of it, the orchestrated stuff, is played right in real time.
And it sounds good too.
Yeah, it sounds more
very organic.
Yeah, it sounds more realistic, doesn't it? Yeah. And you're no stranger to orchestral stuff. I thought it was funny that we were putting this track together like last year. I think you were, or maybe it was the winter I came over. I can't remember. It's probably just before COVID, and you were doing an orchestral mix of Cutting Crew, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then I thought of some other previous records you had done. So you really, you seem to...
I haven't done a lot.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I mean, but it was a real treat to get to do this particular one, because, they're all custom written tracks from you, and then orchestrated. Whereas the Cutting Crew one, as good as it was, they were already written, and they had already been hits, and then they were orchestrated on top of that. So, but kept the same kind of feel. These are starting from scratch, so it's kind of unique and special.
Yeah, it certainly was. It certainly was a lot of fun, and I think what's interesting too is that the tracks are different in that for somebody like myself who's always listened to John Williams or whoever. And like the next track we'll play is Turquoise, which is basically solo classical guitar, and Scott's orchestrated it. And even the way you mixed it in was, like, as I was last time we talked about this, is quite bold and very present, and not super subtle in terms of like, oh, I think I hear some orchestration there. This is much more dominant, and there's not really many guitar overdubs on the record, which is kind of great for me, because I kind of started the tracks and then you guys did all the work finishing them. It's kind of a nice way to work.
There's plenty of orchestra on there.
Yeah.
And it sounds good in mono too. I was enjoying it.
Mono's great, isn't it? I mean, mono's really got its merit. I mean, when you listen to those old Beatles recordings.
The classic is the old Beatles stuff.
I know, it sounds amazing, and actually,
the monos still sound better than anything else, I think.
I bought the Abbey Road vinyl, which sounds incredible, and so I went out and I bought the remastered Revolver, and I couldn't get over the fact that all the drums are hard panned, and the panning really struck me as really like a little much. And the mono ones I have, I'm pretty sure I have them digitally somewhere, but it's better, right? I mean, some of it's just like, because it wasn't intended to be that way, was it, in those early recordings?
No, it wasn't. That was a mistake.
Yeah, it was a
Somebody
mistake, and
misinterpreted
yeah,
the instructions.
yeah, yeah, and then it became the norm, right? But
Yeah.
but somebody asked, I think Caroline asked a question. What was it about the orchestrating? I'm missing some of these questions here. Let me see. Now I want to go back. Oh yes, we could print. The software is such that you could ask Scott about this, but I believe we could print it out and have a real orchestra play it one day. I mean, if that ever, hey, you never know, right? We could do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, yeah, that might be that might be something that may occur one day. Have you ever tracked a live orchestra?
Record.
Yeah. I guess when you did Klaatu and other records, you how big were the orchestras? Were they smaller string sections and doing overdubs, or were they like full on orchestra stuff back in the day?
What was this?
Well, Klaatu and other records.
Yeah, that was the London's part of the London Symphony.
Is
So
that right?
that was a pretty big string section. I don't remember exactly how many, but it was 12, 16 strings.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
we didn't have a big bass section or cello section, but we used about 14 first and second violins.
And you probably didn't use a microphone on everything, did you?
No, there would have been like I forget what Keith used now.
Yeah.
But it was a stereo pair over the violins, and then some particular mics that would pick out various details in the orchestra. But
no, that's amazing.
You usually use like a stereo pair over the top, and then, as I say, individual mics.
What is Terry's? There's a question. What is Terry's take on Rush adding a string section? I guess that was for the.
I thought it was kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool too.
It was nice. I mean, especially live, it really added a different flavor to the show, and I think that was a good thing for them. I mean, they were always, you need to do that, right? You need to have different elements involved in order to excite the audience, so that you give them something fresh. And I thought that was a really fresh thing to do.
Cool. Yes did a tour with an orchestra, and I think that Steve Howe, John Anderson said that the orchestra ended up being cheaper than Rick Wakeman.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I just said that Yes. Oh, I'll speak more into the phone here. You said that Yes did a tour with an orchestra, and Steve Howe, John Anderson said that the orchestra ended up being cheaper than Rick Wakeman.
Cheap and what?
Cheaper than Rick Wakeman.
That's perfect.
I know, but it gives you an idea of what's going on, right? Hey, I got a question for you that I don't think I've ever asked, because I thought, well, what's a couple of things I could ask Terry about that might be interesting? Now, in one of your bios, either your website or somewhere, I don't know if it's Wikipedia, I came across a while back, that said that you had recorded a tune with The Who. And was it The Seeker? And what was that session like? Because that would have been
It was mid-60s, and it was Substitute.
Oh, was it Substitute? Is it a single or
Yeah, the single.
Wow, so they did a single, like they went in and did like just the one song. I would have thought that would be.
That's right. Yeah, wow. We spent the whole afternoon doing that.
A whole afternoon. And was it all very serious, or was it
Oh, it was a great vibe. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Really, eh?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun, but it was also a little intense, because it was difficult recording Keith. I mean, he was such a busy drummer, but it all went down really well. It was one of my first rock sessions. So
is that right?
I was learning how to do it back then, as you can tell by the sound of it. But it was a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I just bought I think I told you the other day that I had I bought my first copy of Tommy on vinyl, which I never had. I never really got it.
Yeah.
And I read the Pete Townsend book, and I've been much more interested in Pete Townsend in the last couple of years. And of course, it's such a great record, but it's just some things you just, I don't know, you don't gravitate towards certain things at a certain age. At that time I was much more interested in Led Zeppelin and Yes and Rush. And I got a question here that
Yeah.
says, how was Keith? But I don't think you ever worked with Keith Richards, did you?
No,
Yeah.
no, I didn't.
Okay,
No,
so
I meant Keith Moon.
no. Oh, right. Oh, somebody spelled it Keith, Keef, and usually Keith is when you're referring to Keith Richards. Yeah, so Keith Moon. I know what you meant, but I'm going by the reading here. Hey, Alex, and this is Alex Marlin.
Well,
and,
it was he was amazing. I mean,
mm,
but it was not an easy recording to do. But then we didn't really use a lot of mics back in those days on the drums. I mean, we weren't miking every instrument. It was like an overhead kick and snare, really. But it was still just trying to grab that sound that he put out was a bit of a challenge.
yeah, for sure, and also the kind of chaoticness, but that's part of rock and roll,
Well,
right?
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's like you could never put that on a grid these days, but it's kind of like who
No, no,
cares, right?
no.
And now I know that Pete Townsend even was quoted recently just saying that that just used to drive him nuts, and but he didn't really mean it like he was putting
I
down.
don't hear any really nasty times fluctuations in Substitute, though. That thing rocks from beginning to end.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. There is a lot of stuff that you think it's chaotic and out of time, and it somehow makes so much sense, and it is much more together than what you had maybe imagined, right? Isn't that crazy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other question I hear all the time is that I know that some of the guys wanted to ask some Rush questions, but I think I know the answer to this. But what's the best Rush album?
Oh my God. I that's a really tough one. My favorite is A Farewell to Kings, I think,
Yeah.
just because I have such fond memories of recording it.
Mm-hmm.
So that one sticks in my mind. But they're all, I enjoyed making them all
It's
that
just
I
the
made.
the thing about I remember seeing I was I was pretty young when that record came out, but I remember having the records before that and seeing an ad in whatever music magazine they used to give you. Remember they used to buy records and they would put in like a newsletter magazine type thing of one of the whatever the publication was called. I can't remember, but it had an ad, a full page ad for Farewell to Kings, and I remember looking at the album art and saying, coming, whatever month it was, and me and Scott, who we're going to talk to a bit, we used to walk to the mall after school on the day of release and go buy them. It was such a big deal. But the thing is about Farewell to Kings, which I think you're right, is that with the addition of those extra instruments and the moog and the longer songs and the sound effects, it kind of took on a whole different direction. And you often see that album quoted as like the best prog album, and it seems to be the one that does stand out for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make that record.
Yeah, and
experimenting with the keyboards. Although we had experimented with keyboards before, of course.
Yeah, but not in the same way though, right?
No, that was a lot more serious and a lot more complicated.
Yeah. So that's right. And hey, John and I've got some guys here tuning in that were around the neighborhood back in those days. John Paul Crockett is one of them. These guys had big giant drum sets, and we all had floodlights in the basement and big pearl drum kits with all the concert toms and and the stacks of amps. Even way back when we were starting, it's really cool. But
Wow.
what else can we? What should we do, Terry? We should. What else?
Play
should we
another
say?
track?
Yeah, we'll play another track. How are we doing for time? Oh, it's only
I don't know,
8:38.
I'm not-
No, it's okay. We'll play Turquoise, and then I'll get Scott. Scott, I got to call Scott for
Perfect.
for Faces.
That'll be great.
Yeah, and what else can I just wondered if there's any other questions here. I think people are listening and seem to quite interested in all of this. I'm just trying to see if we can get one more question in. The question I've asked you and I forgot what the answer was is that I started playing Brune's Bane in I think I know the answer. You don't have to answer. If it's embarrassing, you don't have to answer. But where did the title Brune's Bane come from?
I don't really remember. It was, and I can't. I just it was a long time ago. It was 40
Okay, yeah,
years.
well, I know.
40 years
I
ago.
know, but I
I
get
don't.
asked that. I get asked that because I play it at concerts, and
I've been asked it. I've been asked it too
you know
before,
what? I'll
and I
ask
was like
Al. I'll
scratching
ask
my
Al
head.
then, and we'll get a straight
He
answer from
would
him.
know.
He'll
He's got a
know.
memory. Yeah, he's got a memory like a
That's right.
steel trap.
That's right. Okay, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Whatever it is, it's funny. And okay, so what? No, let me see. I got. I guess that's. Okay, the other question. Did I ask you what's the question you get asked the most in all your travels? Did I ask you about that one?
Uh, no. am I? Am
Is
I
there is
supposed
there a
to remember?
question that drives you crazy, or some assumption that kind of follows you around like a curse that you can't get away from, or not really?
No, not
Oh,
really.
that's good. That's good. What about? Okay,
No.
I got a question from Daryl here. He says, "Does the studio really make a difference, like Abbey Road?"
Oh, undoubtedly, the studio can make a difference. I mean, and we're talking historically, I think. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, nowadays, so many records are made so differently that the studio is not as important. But if you're looking for personality to add to, guitar sounds and drum sounds and what have you, then the studio makes a huge difference, or the environment that you're recording in makes a huge difference.
That's almost it more than the actual stuff, right? It's the environment. And the fact that you guys could go, and I think what's amazing to think about. I was read Steve Howe's book, and he talked about when they made the S album. It was in a farmhouse in Devon, and they all lived there. You heard you guys made Farewell to Kings. You were all in Wales, and you were all kind of there for what, a couple of months or whatever. Supertramp, these
Yeah.
other bands lived together. Even Chicago had like this compound where they lived and worked, and I think that there's something different that happens, isn't there, when you're kind of living and breathing it like 24 hours a day?
Well, undoubtedly, when you're working in a residential, which is what we were doing, we were working in a residential studio. It changes the whole balance of how you react and do things,
Mm-hmm.
because you spend all your time together. So
Yeah.
you're in the studio during the day, you eating together and talking over the day's work, and then we'd hang out in the evenings together and sort of plan the following day, and it has a really nice flow to it. And that's all you do, is you
Yeah.
live and breathe this record.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, these days things have changed quite dramatically, where I mean, I find myself doing more than one record at a time and
Yeah.
taking a way longer time to do them, and it gets spread over a year, because budgets are different, and locations are different, and of course with COVID it's made it even worse.
Well, we should
But
mention, yeah, we should mention too that our record was, you still haven't met Scott face to face, and
I know, I
and
know.
we just a coincidence that we started this record really 6 months before COVID, if not longer, because we were going
Yeah,
to do the big track for the recording masterclass, which we had to
that's
cancel.
right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
so I did the tracks at home. Scott orchestrated them at home, and you mixed them. And what's important to note too, which I really am grateful for, is that you listen and we exchange tracks even before we're really in the recording process. So all that is kind of giving me pre-production and direction, as a producer would, right? And we so
Yeah.
but we didn't apart from going for coffee occasionally, we didn't work in the same room. So this record was just really really good timing. And
It was.
just before
Yeah.
the screen moves, I got a couple of questions for you, because Chris Welsh says, Chris is a sound engineer at CBC, and he says, did you work with the Welsh engineer who moved to Toronto, the late Mike Jones, formerly of Decca Studio? That's Mike.
I did
Yeah.
work with Mike. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
we did. Yeah, I can't remember what we did together. But we worked together a few times, and he was a good friend.
Oh, really, eh?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the other question was, do you miss the studio?
Well, I do and I don't. I mean, I spent such good times there and
Mm-hmm.
made some great records there.
Mm-hmm.
And I did go back about 10 years later and cut a record, but it wasn't quite the same, because um, we didn't have all the same group of people, so it wasn't quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I missed it was a beautiful spot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on a lake, and it was in the Laurentians. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
And when
sure.
you were there, you concentrated on making a record, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I miss it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But
well,
I spent some good years there.
Yeah, I'll say so. And wow, yeah, amazing. When you look back at the body of work, you know, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay, Terry.
Right.
Well, I'm going to play Turquoise, and then we're going to call
Excellent.
Scott. And
Fantastic.
Thanks for doing this. I thought it went very well, and I'm really glad you were able to do this.
Pleasure.
Because I called you this morning thinking, should we do this, or is it going to be weird? Are we going to have anything to talk about? But we did. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And we got a great record. And thanks again
we do, yeah.
for the
I look forward to hearing the rest of it on the phone.
All right. Okay, Terry.
All right.
See ya.
Okay.
Yep.
Take care. Bye, everybody. Bye.
That was Terry Brown, a producer extraordinaire. And I'm now going to play for you, before we call Scott, I'm going to play for you the third song and the orchestrated Turquoise from Side A. Produced by Terry Brown, orchestrated by Scott Matthews. Okay, that was. I should have talked over the ending like a normal DJ. That was Turquoise, and that's the end of side A. And of course, thank you to Terry Brown for all his hard work, of course, but for being so gracious and taking my phone call and chatting live here on YouTube. Now, we're going to call the legendary Scott Matthews from Stratford, Ontario, originally from Scarborough, and member of Crucial Taunt and Trouble in Mind. And here's Scott. Scott, of course, did all the orchestration for the new record. Hopefully he'll hear his phone.
Dave.
Hey, Scott, you're live on YouTube.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. We just had a good long chat with Terry. I guess you've been listening. I saw your name up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. And yeah, hopefully, Terry says it sounds pretty good over the broadcasting in mono, but
yeah, it collapses to mono just fine.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah.
So
for those, I know a lot of people in the DB chat room there know who Scott is, but I would just quickly introduce you for those that don't. And you can say hi to John Paul Crockett. He's tuned in too.
Hey, JP.
Yeah. And so Scott, really quick background. Scott and I, which I want to ask a couple of questions, and some of the things we haven't talked about actually, which I got to ask you. But Scott and I are friends since we can't remember actually, and we played in our first band together, and that first band was called Crucial Taunt. And the story we like to tell is that they used the name of that band in the movie Wayne's World, and so we'll get to that in a second. But we did the usual, playing high schools and rocking out in the basement with all the Brador beer and smoke and stacks of amps, as you would expect in the Scarborough basement. And that's kind of where we come from. And Scott moved and was a couple years older than me, and went on to play in bands kind of downtown Toronto. One of them was Glamatron, and then you put out a record under your own name around 83, 84, and did quite well. Were nominated for CFNY awards, and had a song called Boats and Rivers. And as a kind of a solo artist in the 80s, you moved to, before you moved to Stratford, we tried putting a little band together, Trouble in Mind, that I did okay with in Toronto about 30 years ago. But you left that and went to Stratford to be head of sound at, among playing professionally music, but eventually winding up as the head of a festival theater in Stratford and mixing orchestras, basically. And this kind of ties into the kind of work that we've been doing, where it's kind of taken on a more orchestral thing. And that's kind of where we are now. So wait a minute. The questions are flying by here. What's that one? Quick question, Dave Scott and Dave. First meeting. I was probably 2 years old, and I probably threw a rock at Scott. I mean, that's.
Yeah, like we would. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we would go to each other's and your brothers and my brothers go to each other's birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah, I got pictures. I'll post them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are classic. Yep. Now we did actually scan them and post them, so that got a little bit old about 10 or when Facebook started. So for those of you that haven't seen them, there's a wealth of them that need to be posted again, probably.
Yeah.
But so I hope I did a pretty decent introduction there to some of you, a summary of.
No, that was wonderful, Dave. Thank you.
All right.
That was very nice.
And we have made a couple of records together, but the interesting thing is that when Scott and I made a record, and it was pretty new to us to work over the internet. And I think our first record was probably started in 2004, called Amitabby, and that gets a lot of downloads for an instrumental kind of ambient record. And that was around, I think it came out around 2005. So really, we've been at this type of work for a long time. But what makes this special is that, well, one, that we're working with Terry, and the other thing is that it's much more involved, in that we've kind of included the ambient nature, but really put it much more into a what's the word? I mean, it's not. Modern composer. You know what I mean? It's like
more composed, less sort of ambient and improvised.
Yeah. So
You know?
that's and that's kind of what probably something we were working towards because of the laziness of making sounds and doing ambient stuff. You can get carried away with, but maybe sometimes, as we found, weren't really putting our best foot forward, you know. But I wanted to take it back to ask you a couple of questions, because I have this. I tell this story about the Mike Myers thing and him coming down to a rehearsal. And maybe your memory sometimes is better than mine, and sometimes I remember things that you don't remember. And when Mike Myers,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And when Mike Myers came down,
Or vice versa.
yeah, I know, totally, right? Now, when Mike Myers came down to rehearsal, I got into what I remember as a pretty big argument with him. And I knew of him in the neighborhood, but I didn't know him well. You knew him better because you were friends with him and Dave McKenzie, and he was a few years older than me as well. I think he was even a year older than you, or maybe two. I don't know. I can't remember. It's too long ago. But what do you remember from that? Like, I remember, like, he was saying that the word he was used was typical. We were typical because we were playing Led Zeppelin and Rush and Hendrix, and that was over. That music had seen its day, and it was passé. And I was kind of coming from the point of view going, hey, I don't know, I don't think so. I mean, I like rock music. I'm 14 or whatever, and I'm doing this thing. How do you remember that?
Well, I remember it as, yeah, I think you're accurate. But remember, back in those days, like the music you listened to was the tribe you belonged to. You know, like
so, yeah.
it was very cliquey. You know, like were you into metal? Were you into disco? Were you into, you know, R&B? Were you a punk? Were you, you know, all that kind of stuff? And that was right at the time when, you know, well, punk had already punk was still pretty strong, but, you know, for lack of a better word, a new wave or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You know, more pop music, Police and stuff like that, XTC, Stranglers, you know, that type of stuff was now, of course. Then it was like, well, do you listen to that, or do you still hold strong, you know, to Yes, Genesis, Led Zeppelin, Rush, that kind of thing? And so the thing is that we as a band were still like that rock and roll tribe, and he was more in the punk tribe. So automatically, I think that there might have been some kind of friction, and I straddled both. I liked Police and punk as equally as I liked Rush and Yes and Genesis, and still do.
Yeah, I could never understand that, but especially then, you know, like
I think it was more of a cultural rift than a musical rift. Mm-hmm. You know, like and what's interesting is that those types of things these days don't exist anymore. The tribes don't exist, which is a good thing, because it levels the playing field and takes away the social bias towards music preference. You know, like my kids listen to everything, and they don't associate with you know, musical tribe in that sense.
That's totally true. I was kind of getting into Pat Metheny and jazz and orchestral stuff and classical guitar, you know, and I kind of liked. I remember my brother thinking I was crazy because I came home with a Talking Heads record. I bought Talking Heads 77 because I heard Psycho Killer on the radio, and I thought, man, that is awesome. And then I bought Pretenders because, again, I heard the Pretenders. And I heard on the first record, I heard that guitar playing, and it was just like, this is amazing guitar playing, you know. So that stuff was still speaking to me, but all in the Police, but not just the angst-ridden stuff like the Sex Pistols. I just didn't find anything in that appealed to me. But I know you did, you know. But that for me,
I did. But the angst-ridden stuff, excuse me, that kind of fades, you know, and what's left is what stands the test of time, you know. And there's a lot of stuff that does stand the test of time from that sort of movement, like the Police stuff still stands up. I think Stranglers, Elvis Costello. There's a lot of things, and everyone, of course, is different. But and the same goes for a lot of the classic rock and progressive rock as well. Like, I mean, back in those days when I was 15 and you were 13 or whatever, I was a massive Jethro Tull fan for all of, and I think that Jethro Tull was probably really responsible for a lot of my sort of orchestral leanings into rock music. But a lot of that stuff for me doesn't really kind of hold up the same way, as something like, well, Close to the Edge, right? Like, I mean, that stuff is.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some genres where there's something that's timeless, and then other things seem at the time to be on par with it, but the time just kind of separates them, and you see it's like, okay, well, this one is like heads and tails above.
And it's also interesting because it's somewhat it's always kind of surprising, 30 years later, you go, you thought it would have lasted, and it kind of doesn't. Like I remember the English Beat, the first album, it was kind of like, oh, this is going to be a classic forever. And it's kind of like, well, it still is a classic record, but it doesn't, it's not the same kind of presence that, it had back then.
I got somebody just, Andy piped in with Gatto, and I thought I mentioned the other day, like I was playing a little bit of Gatto on one of the broadcasts, and, you always seem to be a little bit ahead having some new record, that whether it was
love Gatto.
Yeah, I know. It's a great song.
Still
man.
do.
Yeah.
See, again, the Gatto stuff holds up.
Yeah,
it still holds up. It's great stuff. Yeah,
great rock and roll. A great Gatto. It's right. It's a great rock song.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So now before we play, I want to play our Big Faces in the Stones tune. So we'll talk about that in a second. But before I do, I got one question for you that was kind of part two of the Mike Myers question, which is, it's relevant to our past because that's kind of what defines, I think, our band of growing up and that era, And so prior to the movie Wayne's World coming out, when he called you, I never asked you, what did he say when he called? Like, I was just curious because, when I watched that movie, there's so many references in that movie between the name of our band, but also the Gasworks, which I had played the Gasworks a million times. I was kind of it's kind of like you, and you're the guy in the back seat of the Pacer. I mean, like that's very, very close. It's very close to home. A lot of people don't know that. There's characters in the neighborhood are actually characters in the movie are based off people in the neighborhood, and you're one of them. So what did he say when he called? About saying, hey, man, I'm going to do this movie and I'm going to use your band's name,
Yeah. Well, right around, he called me up and said he was looking for sort of rock and roll culture band cliches, So there were a number of them. The one that I remember the most was that I think it was Long McQuaid. It might have been Steve's Music. I don't recall, like on Queen Street, and they did actually have a sign that said "No Stairway, do not play Stairway to Heaven."
No, they had one. When I was 15, I worked at Neview Music in Scarborough, and they had a sign. That was on right in with the guitar. Said $1 fine for playing Stairway to Heaven. That's a real thing from Scarborough. Yes.
Yeah, it is totally real. Yeah. And headbanging Bohemian Rhapsody was something we all kind of did. Yeah. So that was kind of reinforced. Being able to wail, like a lot of that kind of terminology, right? Because that's the way we talked in rock and roll bands, right? We had our own shorthand, right? And so I think what's interesting is that Wayne's World and Spinal Tap kind of made it obvious to everyone, or rather exposed it to everyone, what the sort of rock and roll shorthand and lingo was.
Absolutely.
And what's funny, of course, is that it's real. Like that is the way we talk. That's the way we behaved. I mean,
so and you're watching the movie and you're going, this isn't that funny. I mean, this is how we talk.
That's right. I mean, my nephew, every time he sees me, he says, "I love you, man."
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to play we can dedicate this to Doug Hall. I saw Doug's name.
Oh yeah, good call.
Yeah, Doug passed away a long time ago, and JP just mentioned Doug. Doug was the drummer in our first band.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna hang up on you, call you back after Faces in the Stones, and this is the really big track that's about 13 minutes. So everybody grab a beverage or whatever, and you're gonna stare at my face here for the next little bit. But I'm really glad that you guys are listening and interested in this record, or at least tuning in and hearing. I wasn't sure this was going to be a good idea, but it seems like it's going great. Thanks, Scott. I'll call you back in a bit. And Scott was the big orchestrator on this, so this is very much a Scott Matthews record. So Faces in the Stones, and I'll call you back, Scott, in 12, 13 minutes. Right on. Here we go, everybody. And I must say again thanks to my niece Laura for the great artwork. And this is Faces in the Stones, orchestrated by Scott Matthews, produced by Terry Brown, mastered by Peter J. Moore. that's Faces in the Stones. That's our big epic. Thanks for the comments. I'm reading them all as it's. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's real people in that it's Scott using the orchestral software and playing in the French horn and then playing in the orchestra, basically, you know. I did some software instruments. Give you an example. If we want to use a Moog, I can take my phone here and I can basically use the app. Now, this is not what Scott did, but, you know. Sound familiar? So Scott used software called Vienna, and he's got a knowledge too of orchestrating, and all that counterpoint, melody, orchestrated is all basically played in as he's orchestrating in the same way that he would orchestrate for a real orchestra. So it's really quite amazing. I was playing things like the Tubular Bells, which I added in on my computer, and a few other things like electric piano and the piano at the beginning. But Scott did the 90% of the orchestration. Of course, I did the guitars, you know. And that's where we're at. So I'm going to call Scott back. We're going to chat a little bit more, and then we're going to play the closing track. So thank you so much for listening. And just refresh your, says, I think Arizona Michelle's video stopped, but refresh it. That does happen, I think. But as far as I know, the signal is still good, and we're still going. An hour and 20 minutes in here. I'm going to call Scott. Thanks for the great feedback, everybody. I really appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Scott. It sounded pretty good in mono, eh?
Sorry, say again?
Sounded good in mono.
Yeah, awesome, man.
Yeah. So
yeah.
What some people are asking about the Vienna and the software. Maybe you could just do a little bit better job. I think I explained it, but maybe.
No, I think you explained it well. Yeah. It's so it's a company called Vienna Symphonic Orchestra, and they've been in it for probably a decade or a little more. And there are other people in the game now, like Spitfire Audio out of Britain and stuff like that. But what they do is in the stuff that I have is all recorded in studios with the musicians doing, it ends up being hundreds or thousands and thousands of little multi-samples and articulations and different velocities and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So when you play it back, what it does is that depending on your either a value you give it or how you play it, it mimics what a musician will do, of course, to a point. Nothing. I will definitely say is nothing ever replaces a musician. Nothing ever.
But what I wanted to mention too is that this piece is almost 13 minutes long. I can't remember a whole introduction fast bit, which is about 5 minutes or whatever it is. I think we go off the grid after the slow intro, and that's fast cello. All that stuff is played in. So we did that on purpose. When I say we go, just for the listeners, when I say we go off the grid, we're not using a click track. So we're tracking, and I'm tracking the bed track, which is basically just a guitar that I double tracked, acoustic guitar. And Scott orchestrated to that by basically playing each instrument in, right?
Yeah. And so I would kind of like, come up with playing the part, and of course I have no memory, so I can't remember what I did. So I write it down, and then I kind of play it back.
Yeah, that's right. Because our brains have all been fried.
Yeah. So it's kind of that's straight ahead. Of course, a lot of it is that so much music is mechanized, even orchestral music that is played in samples and soundtracks and so on is mechanized. And I think that to not put things on the grid and let them be imperfect is far more interesting and more fun. And I think it sounds more real, when it's imperfect and it's played in, as opposed to programmed in.
And we got a question here, another one from Chris, but he says, how much RAM and what DAW, which is the digital audio workstation, what did you use? I used Logic. Terry mixes in Pro Tools, and Scott did this in Reason, was it?
I did it in 3 different things. I did it in Reason, Reaper, and Studio One, and all just for different reasons, just because of
and just so
dates and things like that.
Yeah, and just so the people listening know that what we do is we share WAV files via WeTransfer, so that I'll do basically the beginning of the track. I'll send that to Scott, and then Scott will work on that. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll give him all the instruments, but he might take them away and just work with one or two main tracks, like maybe just the mandolin track, maybe just the acoustic guitar, which is the foundation of the piece, and he'll orchestrate to it. And then we would give the tracks to Terry, and then Terry would make comments, and then we would kind of trade them around in that little circle. And then when we're finally done, we export the high res real files,
like stems.
We call them stems, and then Terry loads them all in and mixes them. And now we did have a few technical glitches that we won't go into, because it's just, even we don't understand it, and I certainly don't. But that's okay. It all worked out, and the process. Sometimes the process of things not working out immediately gives you more time to think, make adjustments, sometimes redo things, whatever. And even if Terry does a mix, and it's not right the first time, like you make a little comment or a little whatever, and it's like fixed, and then the next thing's fixed, and then you kind of go through this little checklist until it's done. So I thought we got a super cool record. It's probably my favorite thing it's
really great.
Ever been,
Dave. Thanks for inviting me to do this, and really, like, the opportunity to have Terry Brown work on this for me was a personal thrill, because it's such a long history of me admiring his work, and it's too bad. I mean, I haven't met him yet. We've talked a number of times on the phone, but
when this thing is over,
it was a real thrill for me.
Absolutely. I know. I've often thought many times, had we known that we would, when we were kids, had we known we'd be doing this, would have blew our minds. Because I think that Terry's a very humble guy, and he sometimes doesn't realize that body of work to guys like us growing up is such a big deal. I mean, I know he knows, but I said to him once, I said, it's kind of like when we were 13, 14, and we had a record collection. You got Physical Graffiti alongside of A Farewell to Kings. To you, it's all part of the same thing, and you it's imprinted in your mind, in your memory, as an era, and the sounds and what's the word? Those records really kind of expanded the way, at that time, the way you saw music, and it kind of changed you, and it's an amazing thing. And I don't think we really differentiated between, whether it was a Rush record or a Led Zeppelin record, or even, you know what I mean? Have we lost Scott? Are you there? I think Scott's phone is gone. I was rambling on there, and I think we lost Scott. Let me call him back. And as a matter of fact, you know what? I will go to.
Hey, Dave.
Oh, you are there.
No, I'm here. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, my phone was playing some games. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's you then. That's not me. I was worried it was me. Anytime I think something's going wrong with my stuff, I just start to freak out.
No. I just wanted to say, I totally agree with you. Like all of that stuff is this foundation. It's what, it's where we started, how we grew up, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's. What else did we want to say? We're going to close out with The Roots of War, which Terry suggested that we do an acoustic track, a solo track, to offset all the dense orchestration and stuff. And I thought, well, this record is taking on an interesting quality, because what I had kind of envisioned was we had this giant piece, and we were making it longer and bigger, and all the almost used most of my guitar collection on the record, and I thought, okay, well, this one piece, 13 minutes, the whole record is centered around this one big piece, and then we started adding others to it, and each song seemed to have a real I don't know, some kind of importance. Like Elegant Universe, I didn't think was really done in the way that I had envisioned, meaning I kind of heard it orchestral. I always wanted it to be like, Lord of the Rings and the orcs kind of going through going to battle. You know what I mean? And
yeah, well, it sounds that way.
Yeah, and it sounds that way, right? And I think the next one we did,
it's definitely the charging of the army. There's no question about that. Yeah.
And then Turquoise, a lot of people had asked it for Turquoise to be on vinyl, and I've done Turquoise on a couple of releases, and I thought, I really want Turquoise on, so wouldn't it be great to have a classical guitar piece? And of course, I sent that to you, and then you orchestrated it because I think COVID had hit, and you were kind of working at a pretty intense pace, like going, wow, that's like a few days and you get this finished Turquoise
well
back,
that's what's
right?
Interesting about COVID is that it afforded us the time to put it in. And Terry was talking earlier about how making records has changed, that back then the band was living together, they recorded together, they were completely focused, and that nowadays it's not like that. Everything is piecemeal and spread out over time, and that presents a different set of challenges. Whereas this record, because of COVID, we could just completely concentrate, whenever we had a moment or whenever we felt like it. So for me, that was a good thing. It meant that I could work on it one day and then actually come back to it the next day, because our season at the festival is canceled, so I wasn't going to do shows. So I could just concentrate on this.
And Claudia had a good question. Claudia in Germany said, how do you know what's the process to decide when it's eventually done? And I think we've been doing stuff long enough that we just kind of, when it's done, it's done. Occasionally we go too far, and then sometimes those additional instrumentations, be it orchestration or guitar overdubs, aren't used. So, but I think and the great thing, just to answer Claudia's question, you can elaborate on this, but I think the great thing is having a producer, because, it just puts things in check and in perspective, and so that you don't go wildly off track. And you guys really saved me, because one of my favorite things is Dark Matter, and I did one draft, which was, I can't even remember the approach, and then the second one was even worse. And and you said, why don't you just do this? And Terry said, why don't you just do this? So I just did a frickin' solo, and it's it worked out great, right?
Oh yeah, and it's a brilliant solo, Dave. It's just killer.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of adding all the stuff, I think the trick to answer Claudia's question, really what happens is that we typically put too much stuff on, and then we start pulling stuff away, start realizing what's sort of not really necessary and what doesn't contribute to telling the story. If it doesn't contribute to the story, we try and take it away. And so you can't afford to be precious about anything. You just kind of say, yeah, it doesn't work, get rid of it.
Well, we got one more question from Daryl here, and he says, Scott, what's your next project? I think I know the answer to that, but what's your next project?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm just in the process of writing some more stuff, and I'm doing sort of orchestral stuff, but I'm also doing a lot of sort of leanings back into electronic as well, and doing some stuff, wanting to focus on some gnarly Rickenbacker bass and some fretless bass and things like that. But so I've got it probably about halfway done. I'd like to say that hopefully I'll have something out by sometime next year.
Great, wicked, and we'll work on the next DB3 record, and whenever.
Oh yeah,
which,
that'll be great.
I think it'll going to feature like electric guitar and bass, and just like little bits of percussion, and it'll be like a Chet Atkins 1950s record. But it'll be weird because we're going to do it. And just to cap things...
Weird is good.
Yeah. And just to cap things off, people ask me, what's David Barrett Trio? Well, really, this record, David Barrett Trio, is really me, Terry, and Scott. And it must be said that Peter Moore does such an incredible job mastering that it's amazing, really, the transformation. And I think this is going to be amazing on vinyl, so we can't wait for that. But digitally out next week, and on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere, a David Barrett Trio, Faces in the Stones. Thanks to my brother for the title. It's from a poem of his, and thanks to my niece for the really super cool artwork that kind of makes you look at it twice. And Stephen Perry for doing the photography on the back, and which we'll see next year whenever we do the vinyl. But we are doing vinyl. And again, thanks to Scott, and thanks to Terry, and thanks for spending the time, and thanks to all you guys for listening. And thanks, Scott. That was wicked.
Cheers, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk later.
Absolutely.
See you, Scott.
Cheers.
Okay, everybody, thanks. I'm glad this went well. I'm glad you stuck this out. I appreciate you listening to the new record. And I'll be back playing live acoustically. I was going to play live today, but we just, we got talking, and I was going to play bits of the record, but it turned out that I'm going to play the whole record. So I really appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate the PayPal donations, the merch sales, and the, the Redbubble stuff and everything. We'll see you Sunday at noon for the Cedar Box Suite and a special Christmas Rush episode Wednesday. I'm going to close out. I'm going to play you the solo piece, which I'm not going to play live. I'm going to play the recorded version. You've heard it before, but you're going to hear the single guitar. Thank you, Calgary Michelle, and Arizona Michelle, and Helen, and Andy, and Ellen. Oh, Ellen, nice. Yes, your husband did a great job. I'm glad you tuned in. That's great, Ellen. And John, Neil, thank you as always. And, Gwen, good seeing you. Take off. And, so we're going to close out with this last track. It's a short one, but it was Terry's idea to close the record with a solo acoustic guitar piece. We'll see you at noon. Thanks for the comments. I'll continue reading the comments, and we'll sign off after The Roots of War. Here we go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I really had a lot of fun. Thanks to Scott and Terry for taking part and calling in. And we'll see you on Sunday.